Story time with the Tennessee Stud. We had the first segment on a couple weeks ago. It was a big hit. As Ron has said, Ron Fuller is what did the email say last week? He's the Johnny Cash of wrestling storytelling. He's just been tremendous. We got great feedback. Of course, he's got his wonderful program, the Studcast, which Brian's going to tell you how to listen to. But since we got such great feedback on the first segment, we're going to make the second one even quicker. We're bringing it right back while it's hot, bringing the rematch back. Brian, how can the folks, before we go to this week's edition, how can they listen to the Studcast?
You can listen to the Studcast, the history of wrestling, and the Welch Fuller family, an incredible history of wrestling discussion based around Ron's family. You can go to tnstud.com. Again, that's TN as in Tennessee, stud.com.
Well, without further ado, let's go to this week's installment in Storytime with the Tennessee Stud, where Ron talks about some of the more egregiously rotten or dangerous places and people he's come in contact with in his time in wrestling.
I guess it took him about 4 or 5 trips that I went over there before it was from back to where they were throwing guys over the wall until the town was totally dead and gone. And then they started to run Freeport in the Bahamas. And it had a ring problem too. Freeport's ring problem was totally different than Nassau's. Nassau had that hard ring that was monstrous. Freeport had a little tiny ring, and it had nothing underneath it. And it would rain sometimes. I mean, rain like Caribbean rain. I mean, it would rain an inch of rain in 10 minutes. And the ring would fill up with water. It would actually sink in the middle because it didn't have any support in the middle of it. And then so I was in the match there one night, and the guy put a hammerlock on me. It's in the middle of one of those typhoon type rains. You can't see the first row. I know they can't see the ring, and much less the people back in the bleachers and stuff. And so we just go on to work, and whoever I had took a hammerlock on me, and he took me down, and he dragged me to the middle of the ring. So I was underwater. My head was down, right? My head, the ring had sunk so badly that my head was underwater. And, so I would come, I'd take a breath, I'd go down, I'd get a mouthful of water, and I'd come back up and spurt it with my mouth up into the air. And then nobody could see what we were doing anyway. And Stu Swartz, he was always there as the referee. He was like just cracking up, and the guys in the ring were cracking up. I mean, it was working in that country was truly, truly different than any place I've ever been.
And that has to be the first ever attempted drowning in a wrestling match.
Yeah. I mean, he drugged me over there on purpose just to try to drown me. And then he saw I was going to have fun with it. And I think he drugged me out, as a matter of fact, like, oh, well, you son of a bitch, you ain't making me happy here, you know?
Hey, where in this country, because, I mean, we've all worked in some horrible places, whether it be that little rec center in Houma, Louisiana, or some horrible county fair somewhere, or, I was at a New Jersey truck stop off the turnpike one time. Dennis Coraluzzo ran a show in the parking lot on the hottest day of the year. What's another couple of, in this country, in the continental United States, some of the worst places you've worked?
Oh, I've worked, shows in Florida. When you're wrestling in Florida and you got all that humidity and it's in the summertime, and I've worked in buildings in Fort Myers. We used to work in the National Guard Armory, and it would be 92 degrees outside at 7:00 and 90% humidity and no air conditioning in the building and no windows. So, I mean, maybe 110 in the building, or maybe even higher than 110. And I remember doing an hour there one night with Ronnie Garvin in Fort Myers in that temperature. And when they told me what I was going to do, I went and weighed, because there was a scale over there. I said, hey, I just want to see what's going to happen here, how much weight I can lose in an hour's time. And
especially with Garvin.
Especially with Garvin. He's a pretty good grinder. I mean, he kept the pace up pretty darn good all the way through the whole hour. And at the end of that match, I went and weighed. I had lost 19 pounds in that 1 hour, and just body fluids.
Good Lord.
It's, and then, you know, we all got stories about dangerous places, you know. I mean, we got, you know, I've been in some of the most dangerous places I ever wrestled was in eastern Kentucky.
Well, I was going to say you guys knew how to get heat in the old southeastern days. Is it true that you couldn't even let the Mongolian Stomper get any heat on the babyface in the spot shows because they'd come in the ring?
It was so bad that I had to hire a guy just to take care of Stomper. I had to hire a policeman that worked in the matches in Knoxville. He was a very nice guy, and I went to him and I said, would you be interested in being a bodyguard for the Stomper? I said, he won't go to Kentucky anymore without I'm hiring him a bodyguard. And he thinks you're a good guy and you do a good job of protecting him in Knoxville. So, this guy started making all the trips with Archie, and, he was his bodyguard every night. And almost every night there was a riot. But some of the best stories came from Ron Wright. Told me one time that this to me is a classic of all time. He says, we were in Hazard, Kentucky, and Hazard had the same type as Harlan. It was one of those very dangerous towns. And I was talking to him. I said, and I was a heel. And I said, you know, Ron, this is a pretty dangerous looking town. And he goes, you know how Ron Wright was. He said, well, Ron, he goes, I wrestled here, you know, about 10 years ago. And he says, we was in this same building. And he said, you know, he says, see across the building over there, them bleachers. He said, Donnie's in the ring and I'm going to be the main event. I'm wrestling next. And he says, in the middle of the match, he said, a boy stood up there in the bleachers and he took his gun, his pistol out, and he shot twice, bam, bam, into the ring. And I said, you're kidding? I said, he shot? And he goes, oh yeah, Ron, he shot 2 times in the ring. He said, Donnie and whoever it was he's working with, they slide under the ring. And he said, happens to be, I'm standing next to the sheriff. And he says, I pat the sheriff on the back. He says, the guy didn't even put his gun up. He's still standing there. He's got his gun still out in his hand and it's still pointed at the ring. And he said, I pat the sheriff on the shoulder and I said, hey, did you see that guy shot that gun? He's still up there. You gonna go get him? And the sheriff said to me, he said, hey, he said, that's old John Smith. He said, that boy was a hell of a shot. If he'd have wanted to hit them guys, he'd have hit them. So I said to Ron, so he didn't get thrown out? He said, not only did he not get thrown out, he said the sheriff watched him put the gun back in his pocket and sit down in the same seat. He said he didn't even go tell him not to shoot again. And he said, so I said, you're in the main event? And he goes, that's right. And I said, you get any heat? He said, hell no. What do you think?
Well, what was it about Eastern Kentucky? And that was just because it was the towns were so isolated back then. There was no interstates. There wasn't even any decent highways. Even when I was running in the 90s, most of the time, the highway situation was horrible. They settled their own shit, right? What's the worst time you ever had up in Harlan or Hazard or Pikeville, Corbin, any of those towns?
Oh, hell. We had a riot one night, and you're going to love this story. My dad was living on the far side. He was living on the west side of Tennessee, and he knew we were doing big business over there, and he would come over and visit every once in a while. So one time he calls me up and he says, Ron, he goes, why don't you book me? I'd like to work over there. I'd like to work Friday night in Knoxville for you. And Saturday, I want to work at Harlan, Kentucky. I've heard about that town. He says, I'd like to work in Harlan. So I said, hell yeah, Dad, I'll be glad to. I said, I'll put you in a tag match with me. We'll go over and we'll do the deal in both towns, right? So he comes and we work the Friday night down. We work TV on Saturday at 2:00 in the afternoon. And they hurt. It's Dickie Steinborn and the Stomper. And they get me somehow. They team up on me and they've hurt my arm on TV, right? And then I'm wrestling them that night. It's me and Dad against Dickie Steinborn and Stomper in Harlan. So we go to Harlan. Harlan, Kentucky, I don't know if you ever worked there. There's a sign at the edge of town that says a population of 3,300. Okay?
Yep. I've been there many times.
Okay. And we used to wrestle in an old gym there. It was a big old gym. It was a round gym. And it held 3,000 people.
Was it? Oh my gosh, Kaywood?
And something like that.
Something like that. I've seen. Yeah, it's kind of like a dome shape.
Dome shaped,
because it's the only high school for 20 miles in any direction. So they have the big basketball team.
Okay, so the town population is 3,300, and you got 3,000 in the gym. Okay, the whole town's at the matches, right? I mean, they're coming from all those hollers around there, they call them, you know, and they just come out of the hills. I don't know where the hell they all come from, but it's a sold out house. Okay. So we go into town and Dad's sitting with the two guys with both Steinborn and Stomper, and he's working him some high spots up. Right. So he says, yeah, you know, and I said, well, you ready to go? And then, you know, we went out to the ring, and he says, let me start. I got some high spots. I said, no. I said, let me start, you know, and I'll do a little something for you, and I'll get you in there, and then you do your high spots. Yeah, he's like, hey, well, I don't know. Hey, come on. So he gets out on the apron. So I start the match. The people are so into it. Now they've seen the TV earlier in the day. We're going right to the house show. As soon as I got in there, they grabbed an arm. So I started selling it. And I mean, within 2 minutes, we had a riot. I mean, they took me down, they false tagged, they did a couple of little things, and all of a sudden, here they come. And first ones that get there, Steinborn kicks the first guy in the face, kicks him off, and he takes a bump in the floor. Opposite side of the ring, one comes, and Stomper knocks him off of the apron under the floor. Now, we got this cop that's handling the deal, watching Archie's back, so he jumps up on the apron of the ring. And there's another cop from the town, from Harlan itself. Now he's all excited. He sees shit about to start here, right? And so he jumps into the ring. And so now the marks are coming faster. So, and Dad's screaming the whole time, I ain't done my high spots. Damn it. He ain't got in the ring yet, right? You know, I came all the way here. I ain't done any high spots, right? He's all pissed because there's a riot going on and he ain't got the high spot. So he's all bitching about the high spots. And, so the riot it's got to where there's a lot of people trying to hit the ring, and I'm kicking them off. We're all doing everything we can. So I noticed that Steinborn's been backed in. The policeman from Harlan has taken out his gun and he puts it in Steinborn's belly. And he backs him into the corner. And I'm like, oh my God, he's not going to shoot him, right? And so I go over to where Steinborn is, and I take the officer kind of with my arm to push him out of the way, and I hit Steinborn, and I hit him again. I'm figuring, well, you know, the cop panics, and he drops his gun.
Oh, good God.
He drops his gun, and Dickie Steinborn takes his foot and kicks it out into the crowd. And when I saw that, I said, I'm gone. That's it for me. Stomper was halfway to the dressing room, and the guy that was protecting him, they were covered up. And Steinborn hits the floor. He starts out. I go toward that same dressing room to see if I can help them. But that was it for me. When I saw the gun get kicked out in the crowd, and I knew we were in Harlan, Kentucky, I was just like, oh, man, this ain't going to end pretty. And
and a lot of people don't even realize that in those days and in some of those towns, the cops were just as big of fans and as big of fans of the babyface and as mad at the heels as the people climbing in the ring in some cases. In Eastern Kentucky in the 90s, one of the cops was going to take Jimmy Del Rey of the Heavenly Bodies he was going to take him somewhere. I don't know where. Because of what we did to the Rock and Roll Express in the match, one of the uniformed police officers in the town, he was Everett's, Kentucky. So those things can happen. What was Ron or who? Let me ask this question: Who was the hottest heel? And present company excluded. You don't even have to rank yourself in that. But was it Ron Wright or who was the heel you've seen in your life that got more just heat like that from the people to hit the ring or try to cut them or whatever? What was it, Ron, or who else is in your top?
I'd say it was probably Ron Wright. Ron was he was over there big time. And when I went in there as a heel, and I had to turn him babyface because I didn't have anybody to work with. He was one of the best workers I had. I was getting my talent from Nick Goulas.
Yeah.
And you can imagine what that was like, trying to build a territory in a town with Nick Goulas' talent. And so I was really pushing Ron as a babyface, but I worked matches with Ron. I got one more quick one for you. I worked in Morristown, Tennessee. This is another little riot story. It's Ron Wright and Don Wright against me, and I can't remember who it was. Might have been Robert. Might have been my brother. And it's a last match, and they got a ton of heat, and the riot starts. And so I go out on the floor, and I see Ron Wright go down on the floor and underneath the ring. So I'm trying to kind of watch his back, and Donnie's fighting him off in the ring. There's a cop inside the ring trying to help him fight it off. Robert's doing whatever he can do. And I get down under the ring, and I crawled. It's one of those old rings. Have you ever seen those old rings, Jim, that have the springs in the middle?
The big coiled spring in the middle. That made it actually harder to bump on than if it was just.
There you go. It didn't. The spring didn't do nothing for it.
Nothing.
And I mean, I don't know what the spring was there for, but this one had one of those springs. So now we got a ride going on. So I crawl underneath the ring, and Ron's crawled over to the spring in the middle of the ring. So I crawl over there to the spring with him, and he takes a roll of tape out of his trunks and he puts it around my throat. He wraps it round. He says, "Hey, come here. And he wraps it around my throat, and then he wraps it around the spring. And, you know, I'm like, I'm in there trying to help him, right? And then I see, I look, and now they start to pick up the apron of the ring. All the marks have come to the ring, and now they're picking up that apron to see what's going on under there. And they see him tie me up to the spring with this tape. And in comes a Mark. He's got his knife out. He crawls into where I am, right? And Ron sees him coming. And he says, he's rapping, and he sees him coming, and he says, "Gotta go." He goes out the far side of the ring, and the Mark's got the knife. He's trying to cut me loose, but he's got it all by my face, and he's whipping that blade by my face, and I'm going, "Get back, man, get back." Damn, no. You know, he's going to free me, right? He's going to cut my throat trying to free me. Right?
You'll bleed to death, but you won't be stuck to the spring anymore.
There you go. Dog, man. It's like, I've been in so many riots like that. It's just amazing. Crazy stuff. And you see funny things in riot. You know, it's after it's over and you get in the dressing room, you talk about it, and everybody's seen something that was really funny that happened in it. And, so that's,
I tell you, that is fantastic. And more stories like this and more are obviously available at the Studcast.
You can hear more from the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller, each and every week on his podcast, The Studcast, available at tnstud.com. Once again, tnstud.com.